I used to think heartbreak was mostly about losing someone, but I think a part of it is also losing the version of yourself that existed with them. And after that loss, you start searching for answers. Why did things change? Why did they stop fighting for us? Why did they not choose me? Because when something that once felt certain suddenly ends, your mind tries to make sense of it. And I think most people go through that phase, the replaying, the overthinking, the looking back at conversations that once felt normal but somehow feel different now. When I was younger, those questions used to consume me. I would replay everything in my head for weeks, reread old messages, analyze small changes in tone, look for the exact moment things shifted. I thought every heartbreak needed an answer, like it was some kind of math problem, like if I could just find the right formula, the right explanation, the exact reason for why everything ended, then maybe I could finally move on. Maybe then it would all feel easier to accept. And honestly, I think part of me believed that if I could just understand the ending perfectly, maybe it wouldn't hurt as much. And somehow the questions slowly stop being about the relationship alone. They start becoming questions about yourself. What if I had done things differently? What if I had been more patient, more understanding, less emotional, less difficult to love? What if I had become the version of myself they needed me to be? I think growing older changes the way heartbreak feels. Not because it hurts less. Some endings still hurt deeply. Some people still leave a silence behind them that it takes a while to adjust to. But at some point, you stop needing every answer immediately. You stop turning every ending into a reflection of your worth. And now that I'm older, that's what feels different to me. Of course, there are still questions, there always are. But this time, the questions felt quieter, less like self distraction, more like reflection. I'm no longer sitting there convincing myself I'm impossible to love. I'm not trying to carry the entire relationship on my back, and maybe that's what growth looks like sometimes. Not becoming unaffected by heartbreak, but learning not to abandon yourself inside it. Because heartbreak can make people blame themselves for everything, for being too emotional, too sensitive, too available, or somehow still not enough. And I think when you're younger, it's easy to believe love ending automatically means you failed somehow, but relationships are more complicated than that. Sometimes people care about each other and still slowly drift apart. Sometimes people care about you and still don't know how to fight for the relationship properly. Sometimes people choose distance because it feels easier than facing difficult conversations. And sometimes people stop choosing you not because you were hard to love, but because they didn't have the capacity to meet you where you were emotionally. Sometimes timing matters, communication matters, emotional maturity matters, and sometimes two people simply stop meeting each other in the same place emotionally. That realization doesn't necessarily make heartbreak easier, but it does make it feel less personal. I think that's a strange thing about growing older. You start understanding that not every ending needs a villain. Not every breakup needs one person to carry all the blame. Sometimes, people just stop understanding each other the way they once did. Still, even when you understand all of that logically, certain memories can still catch you off guard sometimes. A song, a movie, a place, a special occasion, a version of yourself that existed during that time. And for a few seconds, you feel the weight of it again. Not enough to break you, just enough to remind you that something meaningful existed there once. Maybe that's why heartbreak is so complicated. Because healing isn't always about finding answers. Sometimes it's simply learning how to live peacefully without needing every question resolved. So, the next time you go through heartbreak and the whys and what ifs begin to appear, maybe don't rush to turn them into proof that you were difficult to love. Sometimes they're just part of grieving something that once mattered deeply to you. And maybe growing older means realizing that not every ending is meant to teach you how to love yourself less. Sometimes it teaches you how to return to yourself instead. How do you start over after heartbreak? How do you trust again? How do you move forward after losing someone you once imagined the future with? For me, those questions were always harder to answer than the whys and what ifs, because eventually you can come to terms with why something ended. You can reflect on it, learn from it, accept parts of it. But a house, they ask something different from you. How do you continue with ordinary life after something meaningful fell apart? How do you stop thinking about someone who used to feel like part of your everyday life? I think that was the part I struggled to understand the most. Not the ending itself, but what comes after it. Because nobody really talks about how strange it feels to continue with normal life while something inside you is still adjusting to the loss. For a while, you wish healing would happen all at once, like one day you'd wake up, understand everything perfectly, and suddenly feel okay again. But it never really happens like that. There is a dramatic turning point, no exact moment where the sadness completely disappears. Most of the time, healing is so quiet, like you almost don't notice it while it is happening. It starts in small things. The first full day you stopped checking your phone as much. The first time you went outside without secretly hoping you'd run into them somewhere. The first meal you finished normally again. And even then, it still doesn't feel like healing. It just feels like surviving a little better than before. That's the strange thing about starting over. It rarely looks beautiful in the beginning. Sometimes it's just getting out of bed, cleaning your room, replying to messages again, trying to rebuild routines heartbreak quietly destroyed. Sometimes it's hearing a song that once ruined your entire night and realizing it only hurts for a few seconds now. Sometimes it's walking past places you used to avoid because they reminded you too much of someone, and eventually, those places just become places again. I think that's when you realize healing isn't really about forgetting. It's about making room for your life again without centering everything around the loss. And trusting again? I used to think it meant learning how to trust another person, but maybe it starts with trusting yourself first. Trusting that next time you'll listen when something feels wrong. Trusting that you won't abandon yourself just to keep someone close. Trusting that you'll stop explaining away the things that hurt you. Because heartbreak changes you after that. Not always in dramatic ways, sometimes it just changes what you're willing to tolerate. And loving again changes too. You stop confusing inconsistency with death. You stop believing love has to feel painful in order to feel real. You begin understanding that peace is not the same thing as boredom. And forgiving yourself, that part probably takes the longest because after everything ends, there's still a version of you that feels embarrassed for staying too long, for giving too many chances, for ignoring things you already felt in your gut, for begging, for chasing. I still think about that sometimes, but lately, I've been trying to look at that version of myself differently. Not as someone weak, but just someone who loved sincerely before experience taught them otherwise. And honestly, there's still something beautiful about that to care deeply, to love openly, to believe in people fully. Maybe the goal isn't to lose those parts of yourself. Maybe it's just learning who deserves access to them next time. I think healing is simply reaching a point where the memory no longer controls your day, where life slowly starts feeling lighter again, where you can finally sit with the past without feeling trapped inside it. And maybe that's how you begin again. Not because you suddenly found every answer, but because little by little, life starts feeling like yours again. I think one of the strangest things about heartbreak is how loud the silence becomes afterward. Not immediately. At first, there are still conversations, still emotions, still things left unsaid. But eventually, everything quiets down. And somehow, that can feel heavier than the ending itself because you get so used to someone existing in your everyday life. The random updates, the small conversations, the habit of reaching for your phone whenever something reminds you of them. And then one day, all of it stops. No more messages, no more checking in, no more I made it home. No more sharing parts of your day with the person who used to hear about everything first. And maybe that's what silence really is after heartbreak, not just the absence of communication, but the absence of familiarity, the absence of being known in the small, ordinary ways. I think that's why certain moments feel strange afterward. You see something funny and instinctively want to send it to them. You hear news about your day and almost reach for your phone before remembering there's no conversation waiting for you there anymore. And sometimes it's not even the person you miss, it's the presence, the feeling of always having someone there, someone to tell things to, someone who existed inside your routine for so long that your mind still expects them to be there sometimes. And I think silence changes people in quiet ways too. It teaches you how much of love was hidden inside ordinary moments, not the dramatic ones, just the everyday things you never thought twice about until they disappeared. Good morning messages, late night conversations, sending photos of random things during the day, knowing someone would be there when something happened to you. You don't realize how deeply people become part of your routine until their absence start reshaping it. And maybe that's why certain nights feel heavier than others, because silence leaves more room for memories, more room for your mind to wander back to moments you thought you had already moved past. The way they laughed, the way they spoke to you, the way certain moments once felt safe, and sometimes the silence makes you wonder if they think about those things too, if they ever miss the conversations, if certain places still remind them of you, if your absence still feels loud in their life too. But eventually, you stop needing answers to those questions as much, because silence slowly teaches you something else too, that closure doesn't arrive through words. Sometimes it arrives through distance, through acceptance, through slowly realizing that not every connection is meant to stay in your life forever. And maybe silence is difficult because it forces you to face reality more clearly. There are no more conversations to analyze, no more mixed signals to hold on to, just distance. And maybe that's when acceptance quietly begins to, not all at once, but slowly. In the moments where the silence stops feeling unbearable, where you no longer feel the need to fill every empty space immediately, and eventually, life becomes loud again in other ways. New conversations, new routines, new experiences, until one day, the silence that once felt overwhelming becomes just another quiet part of your past.